Assalamu alaikum, it's Cecil here, and welcome to day 2 of the Know Your Purpose program. And what we're going to be going through today is reframing purpose. So here's what we're going to cover: how do you decide on something's purpose, changing the purpose paradigm, life from Allah's perspective, what does our instruction manual say, and then we're going to deconstruct the human being. So, how do you decide on something's purpose? So let's take an example. What is this? What is this? Is there anything that comes to mind? Have you seen this before? Have you used this before? If you haven't seen it before or you don't know what it is, how would you figure it out? How would you think, okay, how do I find out what the purpose of this device is? We'll come back to that in a second. If you don't know the purpose of something, all you can do is misuse it. So again, looking back at that, if we don't know what it's for or how it's used, we may use it for something else. So how do you decide on something's purpose? I'm telling you a quick story about Dr. John. So Dr. John, he was in war and he got injured quite badly. And what happened was that he got quite addicted to morphine as pain relief. And so he was actually previously a pharmacist before he went off to war. So what he did was he created his own addiction cure, so he didn't constantly turn to the morphine made out of alcohol and leaves and things like that. And then he put this sort of medicine together, and it was used as an alternative to morphine, and it helped relieve his anxiety, helped relieve his headache. And he found that it worked. I said, oh, okay, this is quite good and it's helping me. So he started selling it to the public, and he sold it to the public for 17 years as a nerve tonic that would relieve exhaustion. So what the drink is that? It is nothing other than Coca-Cola. Right? So Coca-Cola, its original purpose was as a alternative to morphine, right? But obviously it's since been used for, it's repurposed itself and using for other things. But it's just interesting that why it was originally created and what it is today is different now. So if you want to understand something's purpose, we need to first understand, what does purpose actually mean, right? So let's define the word. So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, purpose means the reason why something is done or used, the aim or intention of something, the feeling of being determined to do or achieve something, the aim or goal of a person, or what a person is trying to do or become, right? So it's all going towards something. So determined towards something, aim, becoming. So that's one dictionary. The Cambridge Dictionary said why you do something or why something exists. So intentionally, not by accident. Determination or having a reason to do what you do. To have a use, an end to be attained. So I've bolded the key words, by the way. So to have a use and an end to be attained. So that's important. And then dictionary.com, the reason for why something exists or is done, made, used, an intended or desired result, an aim, goal, determination, resoluteness, to set as an aim, intention, goal. So it's all a lot of repeated stuff. But then again, to intend and design. So all of these things are quite interesting when you actually look at the root meaning of purpose. And another way of understanding things is to look at the etymology. So the root word, where does purpose actually come from? So it comes from the Latin pro, which means forth, so to go forth, and poser, which means halt, seize, and pause. And it also some elements of it originate from Old French, which is proposer, which is to put forth. So what that is telling us is that what purpose essentially is about cutting off or seizing certain things and then focusing and going towards something else, which is quite interesting. So let's go back to the thing I showed you at the start. what is this? So again, if you don't know what it is, I'll tell you. It is a duplex rabbet plane, right? So it's basically something that a carpenter would use to sand the floor or create things to shape, essentially. So it's not a particularly profound example. But the idea behind it is that if you didn't know what it was, how would you figure it out? Which is the next question. So there's three ways to try and figure out something's function. So the first thing you could do is, okay, let me try and read the instruction manual and figure out what this is for. Another thing you could do is to ask a carpenter or ask even the inventor of it, right? And the third thing is that we could look at what it's made up of and reverse engineer. So, for example, we could say that, okay, so it's got a handle here, it's got a blade at the bottom, it's shaped a certain way, what it's made of metal. So by looking at the parts it's made up of, you can then start to figure out, okay, this is what it could be used for, this is what it could be used for. So these are essentially the three main ways of figuring out something's purpose. We mentioned previously in the last session that if something no longer works, it's no longer fit for purpose. That means it's dispensable, it's useless. I found this really interesting. What is it called when we use things for the wrong purpose? And the actual thing that comes up when you Google it is, I Googled it, what's it called when you use things for the wrong purpose? It's called abuse. Abuse. So if we're using something in the way that it's not intended to, it's actually considered abuse. So that's again food for thought about what how we're living and our existence. So the main thing to get out of this, how do you figure out something's purpose? You can ask the inventor, you can look at the instruction manual, or you can look at what it's made up of. So now let's reframe or change our paradigm slightly. So this is the main problem I found with purpose, that everyone asks this question from the wrong perspective, because we're all dying to know, what's my purpose? Who do I want to become? What's the right direction for me? Me. The problem is that we're too self-centered as a species, and we've forgotten why we exist. The first thing we have to understand, that it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about any of us. That one of the challenges of putting this program together, wherever I was researching all the books and courses and things like that, everything is self-help. The focus on the self comes first, which is, as I mentioned previously, this is incongruent with our identity as Muslims and obviously with what our principles are at Note. Focusing on yourself will never ever reveal your life purpose. The reason is because we need to begin with the end in mind. Remember the definition? The definition is always towards something, destination, aim, objective, to cut something off, to go forth. So that means if you plot it from ourself, okay, we're the beginning, or where are we actually going towards? So this is a key point to bear in mind, that we have to aim towards an end destination for us to understand purpose properly. This is the most important thing to internalize. We were created by God, for God. And your life will never ever make sense unless we understand this. So this is not a self-help program. So the purpose of this program isn't to find the right career, achieve your dreams, realize your passions, etc. Obviously there's going to be elements of that. All of these things will be byproducts of everything that we're going to be going through, inshallah. But this is all about reframing and rewiring us to understand our true purpose, and how by doing so we can really live our best life, in this life and the next life, happier than ever, inshallah. We talked about self-actualization. This is vital for us to achieve our potential. But what is important to remember at this point is to not use God for our own self-actualization. So we're not thinking, okay, I want to achieve my potential, therefore I need to do some religious work. That's not the aim. Again, for us to be truly God-centered, we have to let God use us for His purpose, because He's created us all with a different purpose in mind, and is what's going to lead to our self-actualization. This paradigm shift is vital if we want to be able to figure out our purpose once and for all. So we have to start from the right position and perspective first. Okay, so now let's go through these three areas. What does our instruction manual say? What does our inventor or creator say? And then let's look at what we're made up of. So our instruction manual. So I'm going to go through a very top line overview, because obviously the Quran is full of things about our purpose, etc. And amongst his signs is this: you see the earth barren and desolate, but when we send down rain to it, it is stirred to life, and yields increase truly. Truly, he who gives life to the dead earth can surely give life to men who are dead, for he has power over all things. A really good summary of this is that a person without purpose is dead, and only God can give life to the dead. The one that we all know: I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. And some translations say, instead of worship, they say except to know me or to serve me. So obviously this makes things crystal clear. The man and jinn are the only creatures with free will, and their purpose is clear. But what does worship or knowing or serving actually mean? So we need to dig deeper into that. Did you think that we created you in play without purpose, and that you would not be returned to us? So obviously nothing's without reason and purpose, especially not God. We were not created just to play. And remember, where will we be returning? Back to Him. And to Allah belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is over all things competent. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and day, are signs for those of understanding. Who remembers Allah while standing or sitting or lying on their sides, and gives thought to the creation of the heavens and earth, saying, O Lord, you did not create this aimlessly, exalted are you, then protect us from the punishment of the fire. So what this is essentially saying is that anyone of intelligence knows that Allah has a purpose for us. We know that Allah did not create us without purpose or aimlessly. We know that He's got a purpose for us. Know that the life of this world is but amusement and diversion and adornment and boasting to one another, and competition and increase of wealth and children, like the example of a rain whose plant growth pleases the tillers. Then it dries and you see it turn yellow. Then it becomes scattered debris. And in the hereafter is severe punishment and forgiveness from Allah and approval. And what is the worldly life except the enjoyment of delusion? So this is telling us that this world that we're in is a complete and utter distraction. The real life is the one in the hereafter. So this is just top line. I've only created one slide but throughout the program there's different ayats and things that I'll be bringing in. But we'll be getting an understanding here of what the Quran actually is telling us about purpose. Okay, so with that in mind, then what does Allah want from us, or what does our Creator say? So imagine a professor, right, who in the beginning of the year he lays out for students all assignments required in order to pass the class. It's made crystal clear that these assignments include mid-year exam, group project, essays, and a final exam. And then at the end of the year, a student comes to the professor having neglected all or most of these required assignments, and then instead submit some extra credit work hoping to pass. The extra work is of great quality, and he was a very good student in general in terms of attendance and conduct. What should the professor do? So the professor in this instance, most people would say he's got every right to fail the student. If the student responds, but look at all the extra credit I did, the professor can reasonably reply, but I did not tell you to focus on that. You did that on your own. I give you a very specific set of clear assignments to submit, but you did not comply, so you fail. And so this is very simple, but it's a sort of clear analogy that Allah has obviously placed a set of required assignments for us to follow and submit. And if we were to neglect all of these assignments and focus exclusively on different things, I'm a good person, I've got a good heart, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, we can be quite reasonably considered that we did not fulfill the original assignment set out for us. Especially because He even if we've done decent amount of a decent amount of good actions, even ones that Allah is pleased with. He has also given us the skills and gifts and things that we've got for a reason, for a specific purpose. So again, if we haven't done that, we may be, we could fail. And that analogy reminds me of this quote by Rumi. It is as if a king had sent you to a country to carry out one specific task. You go to the country and you perform 100 other tasks, but if you have not performed the task you were sent for, it is as if you have done nothing at all. So people have come into this world for a particular task, and that is our purpose. If we don't perform it, we will have done nothing. By Rumi. So, with all this in mind, we need to start looking at life through a different lens, through the lens of what Allah, our Creator, has set for us. What does He actually want from us, and how do we live our life? It changes the lens versus, how do we see our life currently? How our current life is, or the wrong perspective, 15 years in education, then working for 50 years, and then we retire at 65, and then we've got 10, 15 years of enjoyment. But remember, the game or the aim we have, what matters most is what actually God wants for us. That's not to say we shouldn't work hard, we shouldn't aim for greatness, but we need to remember the reason we're doing it. It's not this, for the sake of, we want a really good reputation, we want to have lots of money, we want to have we'll get a world record. These eventually fade, but the deeds in our book obviously do not fade. So this is the real test to pass. We're only going to be on Earth for 100 years max. But just one day in the afterlife, for example, lasts 1,000 years. So we're going to go into this. Our soul is actually what's real and what's going to live on, not our body. So that's the real test. So this world is preparation for that forever world. They know only the visible worldly life and are totally neglectful of the hereafter. If we can internalize this, we're going to begin to think and live differently, because we are very short term as an ummah in general, but this is the ultimate strategic thinking, because this world is obviously the tip of the iceberg, and the rest of the iceberg we can't see. But this is why we feel misaligned, inauthentic, incongruent in our current lives, because we are way away from the things that we should be doing, the things that give our soul peace, and the way that we were created to live our life and what was intended. And the life, as we mentioned earlier, the life of this world is nothing but diversion and play. Surely the abode of the hereafter is indeed the true life, al-hayawan, the true life, if only they knew. So that's the iceberg. So we can see this world, but it's the depth of it and the magnitude of the next life is under the surface. So with that, again, how does Allah see our lives, and how do you summarize this part? So first of all, He sees it as a test. So obviously He tested the prophets. Adam was tested. Ibrahim was tested with the sacrifice. And your character is revealed by your tests and trials. When you understand life in this way, you realize that nothing is insignificant in your life. How do you act even when you're severely tested? So He also sees it as a trust. We are Allah's Khalifa, His steward. We've been given gifts and intelligence like no other, and Allah is Lord of the worlds, owner of the Day of Judgment. That means that everything on earth is on loan to us. We never actually own anything. We're just caretakers, and this role is ours until the end of time. When someone borrows us something, we often take better care of it, as we know it's not ours and we've got to give back. But do we do that in this world? He also sees our life as a temporary assignment. It's short and transient. Be in this world as though you're a traveller. Don't get too attached. So imagine, for example, you're on holiday and you're borrowing someone's luxury holiday home. Obviously, you'd fully enjoy it and stuff, but you wouldn't start settling. You wouldn't start buying a washing machine and changing the wallpaper and changing the carpets, because you're just there temporarily. It's the same thing. And this is another great example. Imagine you were asked by a country to become an ambassador to an enemy nation. You'd have to learn the language, you have to learn the customs to accomplish your mission. But now imagine you got so cozy in that time, you ended up preferring it, and you started putting that country's needs above your own. That's essentially what we're doing by preferring our stay in this life and getting too attached to what is around us. A term that I use for it is, you can almost say it's spiritual zina. So this thing, I mean, this is what I'm doing here is that we're going to be going into a lot of this stuff a lot deeper, and so we can truly not only just understand it, but again begin to live and live and internalize it. But this is again just very top line, looking at okay, what are Allah's expectations for us? So as we mentioned, He sees our life as a test, He sees it as a trust, and He sees it as temporary. These are the three things. So this is how we should see it as well. And whoever is dutiful to Allah, He makes a way out of him from every difficulty, and He will provide for him from places he never could imagine. And whoever puts his trust in Allah, He will suffice him. Verily, Allah will accomplish His purpose. Indeed, Allah has set a measure for all things. So we said that the third way of figuring out something's purpose is to look at what it's made up of. So now let's deconstruct ourselves, the human being. And why is this important? I like this quote just to set the tone. Why do you study knowledge for the sake of worldly mouthfuls? The rope is for people to come out of the well, not for them to go from this well to that well. You must bind yourself to knowing this. Who am I? What substance am I? Why have I come? Where am I going? Whence is my route? At this time, what am I doing? Towards what have I turned my face? That's from Shams al-Tabrisi, who was Rumi's teacher. So, deconstructing the human being. So first of all, we need to understand what we're made up of to fully understand how to ensure that we're being used correctly. So this is, an element of first principle thinking where you break things down to its core components and then you build it back up again. So according to the Quran, we're actually made up of 4 different components or different parts. There's a physical body, then there's a spirit or a soul, then there's a fitra, which is nature or a natural disposition, and then there's light, which is what makes us enlightened. And so the Quran presents this view of the human in these different elements: a physical creature, a spiritual creature, a creature that's naturally disposed towards worship, and then an enlightened creature. And all of these are gifts sent directly from God to serve as a means towards us attaining human perfection and self-actualization. So the soul and the body are the 80-20. Right? So the 2 biggest elements are made up of these 2 components, the physical body and the soul. The body is merely the vehicle, whereas the soul existed before the body and will exist long after the body has gone. And a person is actually defined by their soul. So this is what gathers deeds, etc. So this is our true essence. Everything else is borrowed and we return back to God. So as we see, I said, we're a body, we're a spirit, we're nature or natural disposition, and then we're also nur or light. So let's go into the body now. Let's understand the physical body a little bit deeper. So the first thing is that we are obviously made up of a lot of different chemical elements: oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, etc. And so we're made up of, not just us, everything in this world is made up of the 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, plasma. So, for example, water, you have ice, and then you have obviously water, and then you have vapor. So in the Quran, Allah says man was made of dust. So that's in Surah Ghafir, which is earth. Then Allah also says that man was made of clay, which is earth and water together. He also says we're made of formed dried mud, which is earth, water and air. And then he said we're made of fired clay, Surah Rahman, earth, water, air and fire. So interestingly, these 4 things, earth, water, air and fire, are the kind of the 4 elements. The 4 elements that everything in the world is made up of. And that's a theme that you'll see constantly throughout this program. This macro or micro. We're a microcosm of the macrocosm, the wider world, and the way Allah's built systems. So obviously, as I said, water, earth, air and fire, the natural elements that make up the earth. The human body is made up of cells, bones, DNA, bacteria, chemicals, but they are made up of core elements in these top line proportions. So for example, 65 to 70% is water, 12% is earth, 6% is air, 4% is fire. Each element is responsible for different structures in the body. So earth forms solid structures such as teeth, nails, bones, muscles, skin, tissues, and hair. So these give structure and strength to the body. Water forms saliva, urine, semen, blood, and sweat. Fire forms hunger, thirst, sleep, the vision in the eyes, and the complexion of the skin. And air is responsible for all movement, including expansion, contraction, vibration, and suppression. This will become more relevant later when we start going into ourselves and understanding ourselves deeper, etc., etc. But again, just as a top line overview, it's important to know, what we're made up of at our core. So even scientifically, what would a scientist say about what we're made up of? Well, they would just say, oh, well, we're energy, we're made up of atoms, right? And atoms are energy, right? So with that in mind, we can also then understand, how we need to, if we're made up of energy, then we need to understand how to master energy. So this was a really good bit of work taken from The Energy Quadrant by Tony Schwartz. Now, what he is saying is that there's when people think about energy, especially when it comes to the human, they mostly think of physical energy. So, oh God, I'm feeling really tired. They assume that, oh, okay, well, in that case, you just need to go get more sleep, or you need to rest, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. But what this research did was that he says that, actually, we have 4 different types of energy, and us recognizing these different types can then help us to go deeper into, okay, this is what area that we're struggling in and what we need to do to fix it. So to give you an example, the first energy is the energy of the body, the physical energy, so health and fitness, etc. So this is what we all know of, and what we assume when we talk about energy. And so how do you improve this? This is just the 4 pillars: nutrition, sleep, fitness, and rest. So if you have good nutrition, good sleep, good fitness, and good rest, then this area will be in optimum condition, and you'll have lots of energy. Mental energy. So some people can be very physically fit, but they're just mentally tired and mentally fatigued. So this often happens with work and burnout and things like that. So the energy of the mind gives you your ability to focus and be productive. And so what this is improved by is through time management, productivity, meditation, breaking things down, being more efficient, doing one task at a time, etc. So that's how you improve mental energy. Then you have what's called emotional energy. So sometimes, again, people might be fine physically, even mentally they're okay, they're not burnt out or anything, but they're just feeling really run down. They're just feeling anxious and unhappy and this and that. So this is, again, they might be emotionally drained. So this is improved by social time or me time, or just letting it all out. So having a big cry, or punching a punch bag or something like that. So again, it's just getting those negative emotions out of your body, and that then improves your energy. And then the final one is, I find the most interesting. It is your spiritual energy. So this is the energy of the spirit, and what this is actually linked to is your overall purpose, something that is greater than yourself, your big mission. And what the most interesting thing about it is that it's actually the most powerful of all the energies, and so much so that it can actually power the other 3. So to give you an example, you might be run down, like physically tired, you might be mentally, at your end, even emotionally you could be like really struggling, but because you're powered by this huge cause that consumes your entire being, you'll find, I just need to do one all-nighter. Let me just do one last bit of work. Let me just go see that person. Let me just go. And that's the power of you understanding your purpose. It will fuel your energy. So that's good. So as you can see, we can understand ourselves a little bit better in terms of what we're made up of, and then even from the energy perspective. So earth, wind, water, and fire. the main kind of components of the physical, and then obviously we're made up of all these atoms. So now let's try and understand the spirit a little better. Since the origin of the soul is outside the realm of this world, its nourishment is spiritual in nature, whereas the body's nourishment is found in this world. So obviously we know that the body, it needs water and food to keep going, but obviously the soul doesn't need that. It needs spiritual fuel, etc. So, and we need to find a balance between this, as whichever the two are fed, it's at the other's expense. So think about Ramadan, for example. We fast, and because we're fasting, so we're starving the body of fuel, our spiritual fuel is increasing. And that's how it's balanced. I want to ask you, what's the opposite of spirituality? A lot of people think the opposite of spirituality is, I don't know, atheism or something like that, but it's actually materialism. And I remember being really fascinated when I heard that, because one, materialism basically serves the ego, and whereas spirituality serves the soul. And so the more you serve your desires, the less space there is for your soul. You're suppressing that side, vice versa. So so that's just something to bear in mind. So the blueprint of the soul. So basically it's made up of these four elements. There's the qalb, the ruh, the nafs, and the aql. And the word heart is, especially when you look at a lot of Islamic literature, is often interchangeable with the spirit and the soul. So what qalb means, for the most part, is the physical heart which pumps blood. Right. The ruh means heavenly, subtle, and spiritual substance, which is the true essence of the human being. That's the sort of conscious, knowing, and perceiving part of the human. And this is the one that's addressed, punished, blamed, and accountable. So this is from Imam Ghazali. And then the self, which is the nafs, is the psyche. And then the aql is the mind or the intellect. But they all form this spirit. So with that in mind, as we know that our core essence is this soul, and that is what it needs to be in a good state before Allah in the afterlife, etc. We need to that's the 80-20 of life, really. How do you ensure that is doing its job, or that is in a good state? So we need to understand what the soul or the heart actually wants. And again, according to Imam Ghazali, what he says is it wants sa'ada. Sa'ada means contentment, or means happiness, right? So the right question we need to be asking is, okay, let's reverse engineer that then. What makes the soul happy? So according to, again, Imam Ghazali, he says true contentment, true happiness can only come from one thing: knowing God. Right? When you know God, the heart has sa'ada, is fully content. And so he wrote a book called The Alchemy of Happiness. Again, so so in that he's detailed the journey towards true happiness of knowing God, and how do you do it, and the way you do it is by mastering the heart. So let's get to know the heart a little bit then, or this rule that we're talking about. So the heart is that which, if a man knows it and he knows himself, he knows his Lord. Right? That's how important it is. Right. So the first thing we need to understand about the heart is that there's an ongoing battle of the heart and soul. There's a famous hadith which said, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Verily, in the body there is a piece of flesh which, if sound, the entire body is sound, and if corrupt, the entire body is corrupt. Truly, it is the heart." So, as I mentioned earlier, the heart is the key to everything. Us being on our purpose, etc., we have to figure out how are we going to master this bit of flesh that's in our body. And as you can see from the diagram, this is the constant battle it's under. It's always swaying between good, being angelic, being disciplined, being focused, being purposeful, and being evil, being demonic, following its passions, following its desires. And obviously the world, the way it's set up, the shaitan, he's always calling you towards evil, And so this is our constant battle that we have to try and stay disciplined, etc. And so this is a great analogy from the book. He said that the body is a kingdom, and your soul is the city, and the heart is the king, and the limbs and the organs are the workers. Right, so they're working on behalf of the city and the kingdom. But then what you have is the appetite, which is the politician, and the anger is the policeman. The intellect is the vizier or the chief minister, and the heart is the king. And so the body is in a constant spiritual struggle between being held captive by anger and appetite and using them as a mount and a weapon to attain spiritual fulfillment. But if the heart acts at the advice of the intellect and keeps anger and appetite under control, the path to happiness will be made accessible. But if the intellect becomes the prisoner of anger and appetite, the kingdom will become desolate and the heart will be destroyed. So what it's saying, really interestingly, is that the heart is the king of the entire body. That decides, are you going to be, is the kingdom going to be thriving or surviving, right? And the way to do it is that, but the intellect is guiding it and advising it. And if your the advice is taken on board, it means that you're able to discipline your appetite, which is again desire, your anger, passion. Right? You're able to discipline these areas, and that is the key to salvation and success. So yeah, that's the kind of the example. One of the things that I didn't mention at this stage is that the constant battle is obviously going between good and evil, but the heart is constantly optimizing or working towards seeking its happiness through knowledge of God. And the way it acquires this knowledge of God is through the knowledge of God's creation. So that's what our default place is. If we're seeking knowledge of God's creation, and that's giving us more knowledge and God consciousness, that's what makes us happy. And so that's why Shaitan's working in to try and distract us away from that. So then we have the traits of man's nature that we have to try and keep under control. So we know that this battle is constantly going on, and you know, it's a kind of a kingdom. But then we have certain inclinations inside of us that can sometimes prevent us from being successful. So there's elements of the inner being, which are the traits of man's nature. So, and we have to try and keep this stuff in balance. So each person has the qualities of the dog, which is, the dog is predatory and animalistic, and that is kind of manifested as anger. Then they have elements of the demon, so that's got cunning, deceitful, evil intention. It has an element of the pig, which is the desire and the lustful and brutish and greedy. And then it's got the angelic, the wise man. This is the God-given wisdom and knowledge and stuff. And depending on who you are, you will default more towards a certain one of these. But we all have every single element of these. And so again, this is what we, when we have to be disciplined and we're working hard to stay on the path, it's because we have to try to elevate our angelic nature above all the others. So it means that we need to harness the qualities of the wise man and understand the real nature of things, so we keep the other natures under control, controlling our lusts, our desires, our anger, and our inherent evil. As I mentioned, we all default naturally to one of these, but all exist within us. So again, that's just an interesting thing to know when you think about some of the challenges and where we kind of default to. And when we go into the whole knowing yourself portion of the program, this stuff again will come out in a bit more sort of detail. But it's good to just know at this stage that this this battle's going on. Psychological is a modern word for the soul. What level is it other than the level of the soul? What else matters but the condition of people's souls? It is the soul that dictates everything, and the souls are sick, so we are sick everywhere. So this is another example of the whole macro-micro thing. The soul is an immense thing. It is the whole cosmos, since it is a copy of it. Everything which is in the cosmos is to be found in the soul. Equally, everything in the soul is in the cosmos. Because of this fact, he who masters his soul most certainly masters the cosmos, just as he who is dominated by his soul most certainly is dominated by the whole cosmos. So again, if you can master your soul, as in stay disciplined and upright and steadfast and all of these things, then you will be successful in the world. And if you struggle with containing certain aspects of your heart, you go towards your desires more, or you have a angry nature, etc., then you'll struggle in the world when these things will affect you. So now let's understand the third element, which is the fitrah. Fitrah in Arabic, in terms of the root word, it means the way something is created. So we were created on the fitrah. So everything that exists has a fitrah. But a human's fitrah is called fitrat Allah, which means the nature of God. That means we've actually been given the best of natures. So the way we stand, the way we eat. We've been endowed with potentially infinite knowledge of God and the innate desire to worship. So if you look at every human, it actually inclines towards service naturally. So it has to serve something, and if it's not serving God, then it's going to serve the devil, or it's going to serve science, or one of the isms. But this is how we get really bogged down in activism and of someone who is really hardcore vegan or really hardcore feminist or really hardcore football supporter or whatever. It's because this natural fitrah is predicated upon serving something. The other thing I was going to say was the world, and we touched on it last time, the world obviously is trying to make you feel that there's no meaning. And as a result, it's also trying to make you feel insignificant. Oh, look how big the world is, and there's all these problems. You can't solve anything. You're just nothing, and you're insignificant, and you're meaningless. Again, that's another thing that's trying to eradicate hope. Whereas that's the opposite of what's true. We Allah has created us to be the most significant. We're fitrat Allah. We've got the nature of God, and so this is just something to bear in mind, that how much potential or how much gifts He's given us are huge. Your fitrah cannot be substituted, but it can be altered depending on what it's exposed to. So everyone has got their own fitrah, but it can be influenced and shaped accordingly. So the fitrah is completely pure and clean. So if there was no external influence, if there was no negativity in the world, etc., we could actually live without law, and we would be naturally upright, standing individuals. It is external influence that deviates humans from their nature. So that means we're actually perfectly created. So we don't. We are free of anything that's contrary to truth and innocent. So if who we are today is anything other than good and upright, that's because we've been exposed to bad things. That's happened from the outside. But our true nature is that of a Hanif, which is a seeker of truth. This is what Allah's kind of implanted within us. So this is why all children, even that of non-Muslims, are guaranteed Jannah. So in the story of the Miraj, Prophet even saw non-Muslims in Jannah, and that was because a child, before they hit a certain age, are innocent and they are on the fitrah. And there's another a scholar, Al-Qurtubi, kind of confirmed that point as well. The fitrah was stamped upon us in a covenant. So, and in the Quran it says we did not find most of them true to their covenant. So what most scholars say that this verse means is that we're not faithful to our natures. So Allah's created a certain way, but we're not faithful to that. We do something else other than our nature. And so what I mean by the fitra stamped upon us in a covenant, before we, again, one thing that we'll learn later on in the program is the different phases of the soul, the journey that we go on. And so in the previous stage or phase, that's where this fitra was stamped upon us, or that's where this covenant was made. All this stuff also tells us is that faith is something that only needs to be brought out because it's already inside, it's already ingrained within us. This is why, when we do zikr or we read Quran or we listen to Quran, we feel at peace because it's familiar. Our fitra already knows it. It desires heaven. That's why even in the past, seeing stars, it's something that people would be encouraged to do because it reminds you of the heavenly abode. It appeals to your fitrah. And actually the root meaning of the word desire is to seek stars. And it's also where the phrase getting high comes from as well. So it's quite interesting. And that also explains why our gut instinct knows when we do something that's evil or wrong. Right? We have that spidey sense tingling. That's because the fitrah is kind of this pure thing that kind of knows. But as the more you deviate, the more you drift, the weaker it gets in terms of that influence. So to conclude, fitrah is everything, and that's where we want to get to. It means obviously our natural disposition, and the world and shaitan takes you away from this. If a child is inquisitive, is resilient, is curious, is innocent, they serve happily. And if this is how humans are supposed to be, our fitrah recognizes God and longs for Him, and as we get older, we become estranged from it. So we'll talk more about fitrah later. So obviously we've also mentioned light. So light is something that is inherently within us all, and the good that we do enhances it, and the bad that we do diminishes it. It provides an insight and knowledge from within when it is nurtured through good work. So on the Day of Judgment, our light is how bright our light shines is due to the work and the good deeds that we do here. Ibn al-Jawzi said, "Know that the devil first deceives the people by diverting them from knowledge, as knowledge is light. Thus, when their lamps are extinguished, he is able to lead them astray in darkness." So again, that's these patterns are repeated. You can see them in every era. So another thing, so we've understood now top line from the Quranic lens what makes up a human, right? So we've got these four kind of main elements, and then we've broken them down a little bit, so we can understand, we can get some signs anyway of what we need to be doing, or what our kind of purpose is. What else shapes a human? So one thing we have is driving forces, right? So we have, every human has two things that drive them. One is to either seek pleasure, or one is to avoid pain. And even if you speak to any coach, any the Tony Robbins of the world, etc., that's what they would say is that, look, if you want someone to have change, you either make something really horrible to them that they want to avoid, or you give them a really desirable goal that they want to go towards. And obviously, even if you look at the Quran, the very first few chapters that were revealed were all centered around defining what the beauty of Jannah and how horrible Jahannam is. Again, and I'm talking about Day of Judgment, accountability, because it gets the ball in motion in terms of your own transformation, your own change. The second thing is Tony Robbins. So I mentioned him actually earlier, but he also has just to understand the human more from an emotional perspective, is they have 6 human needs. So they've got the need for certainty. So certainty is that assurance that you can avoid pain and gain pleasure, right? So certainty is also stability, essentially. Then the second thing is variety, because you don't want to be so certain that life's boring. So you need the need for the unknown, change, new stimuli. The third need that the human has is to feel unique, important, special, or needed. The fourth is connection and love, so a strong feeling of closeness or union with someone or something. The fifth one is growth, expansion of capacity, capability, and understanding. And the final one is a sense of service and focus on helping, giving to, and supporting others. The top four are kind of personality needs that we have, and the bottom two are spiritual needs that we have. So again, even looking at this, and what the human kind of is kind of aligned to and geared to, we can come to some really clear conclusions, which we'll go on to in a future module. So with these human needs, the other thing to know is that all six of them are within the human, but again, depending on who you are and your personality, you might have a stronger desire for a certain. So some people might want love and connection, and some people might really desire significance. Some people might really, really desire contribution over the others. And they say that if you can find a project or something that you're working on that has at least three of these needs met, that becomes addictive, or you become addicted to that project, basically, because it just feels like amazing in that sense. So another thing, just as a final thing to mention, is that we're also made up of obviously 2/3 of water. And so, to remember, of those four elements, 60 to 70% of water, right? So that should also give us that understanding that we can actually do anything, because water can do anything. And water is obviously adaptable, it's patient. Obviously, we have that famous Bruce Lee quote, and then there's another quote: "Water does not resist, water flows. Water's not solid; it does not stop you, but it will always go where it wants to go, and nothing can stand against it. It's patient." And I remember, you are half water. If you can't go through an obstacle, go around it, because water does. And again, this is the Bruce Lee quote: "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes a cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes a bottle. You put it into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Now water can flow, it can crash. Be water, my friend." So that's the end of this module. So the action item is complete worksheet 2. So this is to understand who you are and your baseline as it is right now. And then there's just some questions as more for food for thought, really, just as almost like a pop quiz. What are the 3 ways Allah sees our life? Write out the best way how the heart can find Sa'ada. Which of Al-Ghazali's 4 traits of man do you find is your weakest area? Which type of energy do you find yourself lacking the most? And which of the 6 human needs do you most resonate with? So again, that gives you a bit of a reminder of kind of the things that we covered, and understand this stuff for yourself, inshallah. So here's what we covered: how do you decide on something's purpose, changing the purpose paradigm, life from Allah's perspective, what does that instruction manual say, and then we deconstructed the human being. And to end, I'm going to end with this Muhammad Ali quote: "Everyone has a destiny, and the knowledge of that destiny enables one to fulfill it. Everything was put here for a purpose: ants, buzzards, and trees, and it's the knowledge of their purpose that enables every man to fulfill it. Our life begins when a person realizes his purpose in life. But very few people know how to go about finding what's the purpose that they need to go and fulfill. You are part of those few people, inshallah." And that's it for this one. And I'll see you on the next one.